Sarah Holloway was hanging laundry when she spotted the horse. It wandered into her yard from the eastern tree line, its movement slow and uncertain. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about the animal. A paint horse with distinctive black and white markings, common enough in Montana. But as it drew closer, Sarah noticed a bridle adorned with intricate beadwork, the weathered leather saddle with traditional patterns carved into its surface, and most concerning, the dry blood matted on its right flank. "Easy there," she murmured, setting down her laundry basket. At 42, Sarah had spent enough time around horses to approach with appropriate caution. The animal watched her with wary eyes but didn't bolt, suggesting it was accustomed to human handling. When she reached its side, she could see that the blood came from a shallow wound, likely a bullet graze. Someone had shot at this horse, or its rider. A chill ran through her despite the warm June afternoon. Sarah had moved to this small farm just outside the reservation boundary 3 years ago, following her husband's death. The transition from Seattle schoolteacher to Montana widow farmer had been challenging, but she found an unexpected peace in the rhythm of rural life and the quiet beauty of the land. Her nearest neighbors were half a mile away, and she'd grown comfortable with solitude. Gently, she led the horse to the small stable where she kept her own mare and gelding. The animal accepted water gratefully, drinking deep from the trough while Sarah examined its wound more carefully. The graze wasn't serious, but needed cleaning. As she worked, she noticed other details. The horse was well cared for despite its current state, its coat brushed, hooves trimmed. This was someone's prize animal. On the saddle's rear panel, nearly hidden under a leather flap, she found what she was looking for, a name burned into the leather: Joseph Running Elk. Sarah recognized the name immediately. Joseph Running Elk was a respected elder of the Blackfeet tribe, known for his efforts to preserve traditional knowledge and his skill as a horse breeder. She had met him once at a community farmer's market, where he'd been selling handcrafted items with his granddaughter. He had been kind, his eyes crinkling with gentle humor, as he'd helped her select a dream catcher for her porch. What was his horse doing here, wounded and alone? The sound of an approaching vehicle interrupted her thoughts. Sarah stepped out of the stable to see a dirty white pickup truck pulling into her driveway, dust billowing behind it. 3 men climbed out, none of whom she recognized. Their manner instantly put her on alert. The way they surveyed her property with entitled ease, their posture suggesting they expected no resistance. "Afternoon, ma'am," the tallest of them called, though there was nothing friendly in his tone. "We're looking for a horse. Paint with black and white markings. Strayed from our property this morning." Sarah hesitated. These men were lying. The horse clearly belonged to Joseph Running Elk, not them, but they outnumbered her, and something in their demeanor suggested they wouldn't take no for an answer. "Haven't seen any strays today," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "Just my 2 in the stable." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mind if we take a look?" "Won't take but a minute." Before she could respond, they were already moving toward the stable. If this story of respect and integrity moves you, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to No Filter America. Your support helps us share more true stories about courage, honor, and the bonds that still matter. Sarah stepped quickly to block their path, her heart pounding but her voice firm. "Actually, I do mind. This is private property." The men exchanged glances. The leader, a weatherman with hard eyes, took another step forward. "Look, lady, we don't want trouble. That horse belongs to my employer, and he wants it back. Simple as that." "What's your employer's name?" Sarah asked. The man hesitated just long enough to confirm her suspicions. "That's not really your concern. I think it is if you're trespassing on my land, claiming ownership of an animal that isn't yours." Sarah stood her ground, though every instinct screamed at her to back down. "That horse belongs to Joseph Running Elk. His name is on the saddle." The men's expressions shifted instantly from faux friendliness to open hostility. The leader took another step toward her, close enough now that she could smell tobacco on his breath. "That old Indian's been making trouble where he shouldn't. Consider this horse payment for sticking his nose where it doesn't belong." Sarah's mind raced. What had Joseph done to provoke these men? And why would they steal his horse rather than confront him directly? "I'll call the sheriff if you don't leave," she said, pulling her cell phone from her pocket. The man laughed. Sheriff Davis? Go ahead. He works for Mr. Blackwood, just like we do. The name registered immediately. Edward Blackwood was the largest landowner in the county, a cattle rancher with political connections and a reputation for aggressive expansion. There have been rumors of tensions between Blackwood and the tribal council over water rights to a creek that ran through both reservation land and Blackwood's newest property acquisition. The horse is injured, Sarah said, changing tactics. Looks like someone shot at it. That would interest the sheriff. I think, even if he does work for Blackwood. This gave the men pause. The leader glanced at his companions, then back at Sarah. You're making a mistake getting involved in this. Blackwood doesn't forget when people cross him. Neither do I, Sarah replied, surprised by her own boldness. Now get off my property before I call not just the sheriff, but the state police and the tribal authorities too. For a tense moment, she thought they might force their way past her. Then the leader shrugged, the gesture deliberate in its casualness. Have it your way, but don't say you weren't warned. She watched them climb back into their truck, the leader's eyes meeting hers one last time, a look that contained a clear promise of future trouble. Only when the truck had disappeared down her long driveway did Sarah allow herself to breathe normally again, her hands shaking with delayed fear and adrenaline. Inside the stable, the Payne horse nickered softly, as if sensing the danger had passed. Sarah leaned against the door frame, considering her options. The smart move would be to call the sheriff, regardless of his allegiances. Let the authorities sort it out. That's what her late husband, always practical and law-abiding, would have advised. Instead, Sarah found herself saddling up her own mare. The reservation was only a few miles away. She could return Joseph's horse before nightfall and wash her hands of the whole situation. But as she prepared to ride, securing the Payne horse's lead to her saddle, Sarah knew she was crossing a line, placing herself in opposition to the most powerful man in the county. Whatever trouble Joseph Running Elk had with Edward Blackwood, she had just made it her trouble too. Chapter 3. The elder's gratitude to the sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains when Sarah reached the Running Elk home. It was a modest house set on several acres at the edge of the reservation, with corrals and a small barn behind it. Several horses grazed in the pasture, raising their heads to watch curiously as Sarah approached with their missing companion. An older man stepped onto the porch before she had even dismounted. Joseph Running Elk himself, his silver hair pulled back in a traditional braid, his face deeply lined but his posture still straight and dignified despite his 70-plus years. His expression transformed from wariness to disbelief as he recognized his horse. Spirit Walker, he said, using what Sarah assumed was the horse's name. His voice carried both relief and amazement. How did you find him? Sarah slid from her mare's back, leading both horses closer. He found me, actually. Wandered onto my property this afternoon. Joseph hurried down the porch steps with surprising agility. He went straight to the Payne horse, running his hands gently over its neck and shoulders, murmuring what sounded like a prayer in his native language. When he reached the wound on its flank, his expression darkened. Blackwood's men, he said, not a question but a certainty. Sarah nodded. 3 of them came looking for him at my place. I told them I hadn't seen any stray horses. Joseph looked at her sharply, understanding the implication. You lied to protect an animal you didn't know belonged to me. I knew it was yours, Sarah explained. Your name is on the saddle. And I knew those men had no right to him. They didn't even know what to call him when I asked. A young woman emerged from the house, her resemblance to Joseph marking her as a relative. Grandfather? Who's this? Sarah Holloway. Sarah introduced herself. I live on the small farm just east of the reservation boundary. My granddaughter, Naomi, Joseph said, she teaches at the reservation school. Naomi's eyes widened as she took in the scene. You found Spirit Walker? We've been searching since yesterday. The police wouldn't even file a report. Said he probably just wandered off. Joseph was still examining the horse's wound. Not wandered, taken, and shot at when he tried to escape. He looked up at Sarah, his dark eyes intense. You should come inside. We have much to discuss, and I owe you a debt of thanks. The interior of the Running Elk home was warm and inviting, with a blend of traditional items and modern furnishings. Photos of family members covered one wall, and the air smelled of herbs and fresh bread. Joseph insisted Sarah sit at the kitchen table while Naomi prepared tea. "Tell me exactly what happened," Joseph said, settling across from her. Sarah recounted the afternoon's events in detail. Finding Spirit Walker, the confrontation with Blackwood's men, their veiled threats. As she spoke, Joseph and Naomi exchanged significant glances. "They said you've been making trouble for Blackwood," Sarah concluded. "Something about sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Joseph sighed heavily. "The tribal council appointed me to lead negotiations about Blue Creek. It runs through our land before crossing onto Blackwood's new property. For generations, our people have held sacred ceremonies at the springs where it begins. Blackwood wants to divert it for his cattle operation, which would dry up our section completely. He can't just take a water source," Sarah protested. "Legally, no," Naomi interjected. "But Blackwood doesn't always concern himself with legalities. He's been pressuring council members individually, offering money, making threats. When that didn't work, he started with intimidation tactics. Like stealing your horse," Sarah said. Joseph nodded. "Spirit Walker is more than just a horse to me. He's a link to our traditions, a descendant of the lines our ancestors bred. Blackwood knew that taking him would be a personal blow, and a message to the rest of the council about what he's capable of." The implications settled heavily in the room. Sarah's simple act of returning a horse had placed her squarely in the middle of a conflict with deep roots and high stakes. "These men saw me," she said slowly. "They know I lied to them. They know I brought Spirit Walker back to you." Joseph reached across the table, placing his weathered hand over hers. "You have shown great courage today, Sarah Holloway. You stood against men who threatened you to help someone you barely know. Such actions do not go unnoticed or unremembered among my people." There was something in his tone, a formal quality that suggested his words carried weight beyond simple gratitude. But before Sarah could ask what he meant, Naomi spoke up. "You shouldn't go back to your farm alone tonight. Blackwood's men might be watching, waiting to send their own message." "I can't just abandon my place," Sarah protested. "I have animals to care for." Joseph and Naomi exchanged another look, some silent communication passing between them. Then Joseph stood, his decision apparently made. "I will make some calls," he said. "You will return to your farm, Sarah Holloway, but you will not be alone. My people protect those who protect us. It has always been our way." As Sarah rode home in the gathering dusk, she couldn't shake the feeling that Joseph's words had set something significant in motion, something that would extend far beyond the return of a single horse or the resolution of her afternoon's confrontation. Whatever trouble she had invited by defying Edward Blackwood, she suspected it was only beginning. Chapter 4. Night visitor Sarah returned home in darkness, constantly looking over her shoulder. Inside, she locked all doors and windows and loaded her late husband's shotgun. Her border collie, Max, stayed unusually close, occasionally growling toward the tree line. Near midnight, Max's barking jolted her awake. Through the window, Sarah spotted several figures moving along her property line. Her heart raced until she realized they weren't approaching her house. They were positioning themselves around the perimeter. A soft knock at her back door startled her. "Who's there?" she called, shotgun ready. "Naomi Running Elk. Grandfather sent me." Sarah opened the door with relief. Naomi explained that the men outside were Blackfeet warriors volunteering to keep watch through the night, concerned about Blackwood's retaliation. "What you did wasn't a small thing," Naomi said. "Spirit Walker isn't just any horse. He's from a bloodline our tribe has maintained for generations. His theft was a deliberate cultural insult." Naomi revealed more troubling news. Blackwood has applied for permits to build a dam on Blue Creek that would cut off water to the reservation portion. If he succeeds, it won't just affect our ceremonies. The creek feeds agricultural land many families depend on. So this is bigger than a stolen horse, Sarah realized. Much bigger, Naomi confirmed. By standing against Blackwood, you declared yourself an ally in a fight that's about to get very public and possibly very ugly. Chapter 5. Dawn revelation, Sarah woke to voices outside her window. Stepping onto her porch, coffee in hand, she froze in amazement. At least 50 people, men, women, and children, moved purposefully around her property. Some stood watch at the boundaries. Others had set up a camp kitchen near the barn. Children ran errands or played under elders' watchful eyes. "The tribe has come to stand with you," Naomi explained. "Word spread overnight about what you did, and people started arriving before dawn. There are over 100 individuals now." A young woman offered Sarah a plate of fried bread and berries. As she ate, the sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention to the main road. 3 pickup trucks had pulled up at her gate, where Blackfeet men stood guard. From the center truck emerged Edward Blackwood himself. "I should go down there," Sarah said, setting aside her breakfast. At the gate, Blackwood was arguing with the guards. "This is illegal trespassing. I'll have every one of you arrested." "We're here at Miss Holloway's invitation," a Blackfeet man replied calmly. Blackwood turned as Sarah approached. "Miss Holloway, I wonder if you understand what you've involved yourself in." "I understand that your men stole and injured an animal that didn't belong to them," Sarah replied evenly, "and then threatened me when I refused to help. That horse was compensation for interference in my business affairs." Blackwood snapped. "Joseph Running Elk needs to learn that actions have consequences." "As do you," Sarah countered. "You can't simply take what isn't yours, whether it's a horse or a community's water supply." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "This won't end here. You've made a powerful enemy today." "No," Sarah corrected him. "You made an enemy when you decided intimidation and theft were acceptable business tactics. I've simply found friends who share my belief that they aren't." Chapter 6. The media arrives by mid-morning. Someone had contacted local media about the standoff. Reporters from the county newspaper and regional television arrived, turning the situation into a public spectacle. "Ms. Holloway, can you explain why members of the Blackfeet tribe are forming a human shield around your farm?" a reporter asked. Sarah glanced at Naomi, who nodded encouragingly. "They're here because I helped return something valuable that was stolen from one of their elders. It's a gesture of reciprocal protection. A horse belonging to Joseph Running Elk, who is currently leading opposition to Edward Blackwood's water diversion project. Do you see a connection?" Before Sarah could respond, Naomi stepped forward. "The connection is clear. My grandfather's horse was taken as an intimidation tactic. Ms. Holloway's brave action was a stand against that intimidation, one our people recognize and honor." By afternoon, more reporters had arrived, and the story had evolved from a curious human interest piece into coverage of a significant environmental and indigenous rights controversy. Blackwood was now reportedly unavailable for comment. Joseph Running Elk arrived as the media attention peaked. He addressed the reporters, explaining Blue Creek's significance to the Blackfeet people and Blackwood's escalating intimidation tactics. "The taking of Spirit Walker was meant to be a personal wound," Joseph concluded. "But Ms. Holloway's courage has transformed it into a moment of unity for our community." Later, as tribal members settled in for another night of vigilance, Joseph warned Sarah privately, "Blackwood will not accept this public challenge easily. He has built his fortune on never backing down. You should be prepared for him to strike back in ways we may not anticipate." Sarah looked around at the people who had come to stand with her. "Let him try," she said with newfound confidence. "I'm not alone anymore." What she didn't yet realize was how prophetic Joseph's warning would prove to be. Chapter 7. Water Wars. 3 days after the media arrived, Blackwood struck back. Sarah was in her garden with several Blackfeet women who had been teaching her traditional planting techniques when Naomi rushed over, phone in hand. "The county just posted an emergency water restriction," she announced, her voice tight with anger. "Effective immediately, all properties along Cedar Ridge, including your farm, are banned from drawing water from the municipal supply due to infrastructure concerns." Sarah frowned. "That makes no sense. Cedar Ridge has the newest water lines in the county. It's Blackwood," Joseph said, joining them with several tribal elders. He chairs the county water commission. "This is his retaliation, cutting off your water while making it look like a routine regulatory decision. Without municipal water, Sarah's crops would die within days in the summer heat. Her animals would suffer soon after. It was a calculated move designed to force her to abandon her alliance with the tribe. Can we fight this legally? Sarah asked. Yes, but that takes time, Naomi replied. Time your farm doesn't have. Joseph studied the sky thoughtfully. Perhaps there's another solution. He turned to one of the elders, speaking rapidly in their native language. The man nodded and hurried away. What are you thinking? Sarah asked. Water is life, Joseph said simply, and those who respect it often find it respects them in return. By evening, a convoy of water trucks arrived from the reservation. The tribe's emergency vehicles normally used for drought conditions and fire support. Teams of young men began setting up temporary irrigation systems to reach Sarah's fields, while others filled large containers for household use and the animals. The tribal council voted unanimously to share our water resources with you, Joseph explained. What Blackwood doesn't understand is that his actions only strengthen our resolve and our unity. News cameras captured the water truck's arrival, adding another compelling visual to a story that had now reached national media. By nightfall, Sarah's phone was ringing with calls from environmental organizations and indigenous rights groups offering support and legal assistance. When a reporter asked Joseph about the tribe's decision to share their limited water resources, his answer was profoundly simple. Sarah Holloway saw an injustice and acted without hesitation. We can do no less. Chapter 8. The turning tide to water restriction backfired spectacularly on Blackwood. Within days, what had been a local dispute erupted into a national controversy. Environmental activists set up camp alongside the Blackfeet protectors at Sarah's farm. Legal organizations filed emergency motions challenging both the water restriction and Blackwood's dam permits. A week after the water trucks first arrived, Sarah received a surprising visitor, Senator Helena Morrison, the state's junior senator, who had built her reputation on environmental protection and rural community advocacy. Ms. Holloway, the senator greeted her, cameras flashing as they shook hands. I wanted to see this remarkable alliance for myself. With Joseph and tribal leaders, they toured the farm, now transformed into what the media had dubbed Solidarity Camp. The senator listened intently as Joseph explained the Blue Creek dispute and the cultural significance of the waterway. That evening, standing before a national news crew with Sarah and Joseph flanking her, Senator Morrison made an announcement that changed everything. Today, I've directed my office to launch a federal investigation into the water rights disputes in this county, including the suspicious timing of the Cedar Ridge restriction and the fast-tracking of permits for the Blue Creek Dam. Additionally, I'm introducing legislation to strengthen protections for watersheds that cross reservation boundaries. Blackwood's response came swiftly, a statement issued through his corporate office claiming he was being unfairly targeted by outside agitators and environmental extremists. But his usual political allies remained conspicuously silent, unwilling to oppose a popular senator or be associated with tactics that looked increasingly like bullying. The following morning, Sarah awoke to find Joseph sitting on her porch, watching the sunrise with quiet contentment. The County Water Commission is holding an emergency session today, he informed her. Apparently, they've discovered that the Cedar Ridge restriction was implemented without proper procedures and must be temporarily suspended pending review. Sarah smiled. Blackwood's retreating. He's a businessman first and foremost, Joseph replied. The cost of continuing this fight has become too high, financially and politically. What about the Blue Creek Dam? That battle isn't over, Joseph acknowledged. But now it will be fought in courtrooms and legislative chambers, not through intimidation and theft. And we have powerful new allies. Chapter 9. Full circle 2 months later, Sarah stood beside Spirit Walker in a meadow near Joseph's home. The paint horse had fully recovered from his wound and now nudged her pockets for treats, recognizing her as a friend. Much had changed since that June afternoon when he had wandered onto her property. The county water restriction had been permanently rescinded. Blackwood's dam project was on indefinite hold pending multiple environmental reviews. The tribal council and neighboring ranchers had formed a watershed coalition to develop sustainable water management practices, with Sarah serving as a liaison between the groups. He looks happy, Naomi observed, joining Sarah in the meadow. Grandfather says Spirit Walker has never been so spoiled with attention. Sarah laughed. He deserves it after everything he set in motion. You set it in motion, Naomi corrected her, by making a choice based on what was right, not what was easy. Sarah had come to the reservation for the harvest ceremony, a traditional gathering to give thanks for the season's bounty. As a special guest of the tribal council, she would be formally recognized for her role in protecting tribal water rights. The afternoon sun cast a golden light across the reservation as hundreds gathered for the ceremony. Drums beat a steady rhythm as tribal members in traditional dress performed dances that had been passed down through countless generations. Sarah watched from a place of honor beside Joseph and other elders. When the time came for her recognition, Sarah was called forward. Joseph stood, presenting her with a beautifully crafted blanket featuring a design of horses running alongside flowing water. Sarah Holloway returned more than a horse to an old man. Joseph addressed the gathering. She returned something precious to our entire community, a reminder that courage knows no boundaries, that justice speaks a universal language, and that sometimes the simplest acts of decency can change the course of many lives. As the blanket was draped around her shoulders, the crowd erupted in applause. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought her here, from isolated widow to member of a community that transcended cultural differences. That evening, as the celebration continued around campfires, Sarah sat with Joseph and his family, sharing stories and laughter under the vast Montana sky. When my husband died, I came here seeking solitude, she confided to the elder. I thought being alone would help me heal. Joseph nodded understanding, and yet it was connection that finally brought healing. I never expected to find a new family, Sarah acknowledged, looking around at the people who become so important to her life. The best families are those we choose, and those who choose us in return, Joseph said wisely, like the day you chose to return a horse, and my people chose to stand with you. In the distance, Spirit Walker grazed peacefully with the tribal herd, his distinctive black and white markings visible in the fading light. Sarah watched him, marveling at how a single encounter with this animal had altered the course of her life so profoundly. The next morning, as Sarah prepared to return to her farm, a small group of riders appeared at her car, Joseph on Spirit Walker, Naomi, and several young tribal members. We will escort you home, Joseph announced with a smile. As we have done before, so we do again. The sight of Sarah's truck followed by Blackfeet riders became a familiar one in the months and years that followed. The alliance born of a returned horse grew into something lasting, a bridge between communities, a model for cooperation that others began to emulate. Edward Blackwood eventually sold his ranch and moved to Arizona, citing changing business interests. The Blue Creek Dam was never built. Instead, a cooperative watershed management program was established, ensuring sustainable water access for both the reservation and neighboring ranches. Sarah's small farm flourished, becoming a gathering place where tribal elders shared traditional agricultural knowledge with younger generations, and where Sarah taught sustainable farming techniques she had learned during her years as a schoolteacher. And Spirit Walker, the Payne horse whose journey had started it all, lived out his days in dignity, dividing his time between Joseph's care and visits to Sarah's farm, where he was always welcomed as the honored guest who had brought unlikely friends together. And now, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think this act of gratitude meant for everyone involved? Share your ideas in the comments below. And don't forget, like this video, subscribe to No Filter America, and help us keep these powerful stories alive.